questions on the paper, and you have to answer once of those. So this is just kind of a practice. These are the two essay titles. I just point out for the second one, a good answer for this will not only include my content on retinoblastoma, where I talked about the inherited and sporadic forms, but also Bill Greenoff's lecture, where he talked about the role of the molecular role of the retinoblastoma protein in cell cycle control. So you'll need to synthesize information from my lectures and Bill's lectures for that one. On the Monday, week 9, you'll write your answer to one of these under examination conditions, and then the following week, well, at the end of that session, I will give you hard copies of model answers and answers that were written by students in the actual examination to show you what was expected of that, and you can compare your answer to that. Please come along. The only person who's going to see the essay that you write is you. So it doesn't matter if it's not as good as you hoped it would be, but hopefully it will prepare you for the final examination. And surprisingly, this exercise is actually very when we get the module feedback, this exercise is very popular, and people and students seem to like it. So the other thing I wanted to point out was I've put some extra resources on Vital. I've put some web links on DNA repair, just to remind you about this self-assessment exercise, which is now available on Vital as well. And I've also put this condensed notes on DNA damage, mutation, DNA repair, and recombination. So that will be useful when you revising for the both the the essay exercise, but also the continuous assessment SAQs. What else do I want to say? Now, we finished talking on about homologous recombination repair and how, in the absence of homologous recombination repair, non-homologous end joining can come in and basically make a mess of things. But what I wanted to point out was, and I didn't have time to show you the animations because we needed to catch up, but there are links to a series of animations, and these are quite useful. So remember I said that, so there's a link here. Remember I said that in the absence of BRCA2, that homologous recombination repair can no longer take place, and that because homologous recombination can no longer take place, the non-homologous end joining is used to repair those double-strand breaks, and non-homologous end joining is an error-prone process, and it may join the wrong end to the wrong end. Okay, but there's an animation of that. There's a series of animations which I'll point out. The links are there. So there's an animation for double-strand break repair. There's animation for restoration of a broken replication fork by HR. There's an animation on non-homologous end joining, and I'll try and show you this one. How do I make that big? Okay. That's not the one I wanted to show you. Oh yes, it is actually. Take that back. Make that bigger. Okay, so you can imagine where you've got a single strand break that hits the replication fork. You've got this one-ended double-strand break, and non-homologous end joining can make a mess of that and rejoin the wrong end to the wrong end if homologous recombination isn't available. And you can see how that can give rise to the various chromosomal rearrangements that you see in cells that lack BRCA2. Such as this Kaplan1 cell line. So you can see all the rearrangements there where bits of chromosome being joined to the wrong bits. A non-homologous end joining is responsible, most likely responsible for that. and that's all taking place because these cells lack functional BRCA2. Okay, so there's a number of animations. Go back to those and have a look at those in your own time. Okay. Okay, so there's two presentations, and it's simply because of the orientation that I've done this. Okay, so we talked about homologous recombination, how it functions as part of the SOS response in E. coli, its role in conjugation, also its role as a repair pathway in mammalian cells, but another important role for homologous recombination is in meiosis. Okay, so I just want to briefly talk about that. Now remember, there's three different types of recombination, so we're specifically talking about homologous recombination, sometimes called general recombination. Okay, so you can define recombination in different ways. I've been talking about the molecular aspects of recombination, particularly homologous recombination. Now remember, I said that homologous recombination, when it occurs in meiosis, is very often called crossing over. And as part of meiosis, you get crossing over and you get reshuffling of the genes due to this process of crossing over. Okay, so that definition of recombination, you get new combination of alleles that occur in gametes because of this effect of crossing over. Okay, so this definition of recombination refers to this process of crossing over, not really to a molecular recombination. However, crossing over is actually due to molecular recombination. Okay, so very quickly, Steve Hill will more likely talk about meiosis in a lot more detail than I will, but you can get reshuffling of, if we're talking about mammalian organisms, of paternal and maternal genes. If we're talking about yeast, the different mating types in yeast. And so this creates new combination of genes, and for crossing over to take place, you need the deliberate introduction of DNA double-strand breaks. Okay, otherwise it won't occur. So this is just crossing over during meiosis. So you've got the homologous pairs of chromosome here. Here you've represented in blue. So you might have one allele at the A locus here, and another allele, a different allele at the A locus here. So this might be a wild type gene, this might be a mutant gene, and similarly for B here and here. So during metaphase, where you get condensation of the chromosomes, this process of homologous recombination or crossing over takes place. So effectively, you've got holiday junction here. Okay, that's what you've got here. That's what's really represented at the molecular level during crossing over. Now remember, during homologous recombination, depending on which way that holiday junction is resolved, north, south, east, west, or horizontally, vertically, whichever way you want to think of it, you either get recombination taking place, or you just get formation of patches of hybrid DNA. In this instance, it's assumed that resolution of the holiday junction has resulted in proper recombination taking place. So the result of that, now remember the red and the blue DNA in the diagrams I showed you, that has resulted in the blue DNA here and the red DNA here. So you've now got a new combination. You've got an uppercase A here and a lowercase b here. So you've got a creation of a new combination of genes that might confer a particular advantage to the particular organism, or it might actually be a disadvantage, but it allows evolution to test out these new combination of alleles. And again, there's I've put a link to a video which for the sake of time I won't show you. Okay, so effectively what I'm saying is this process of crossing over that is visualized under the microscope when you can see the metaphase chromosomes is molecular recombination taking place, and these chiasma are effectively just holiday junctions at the molecular level. So you can see how these then segregate. So here this is a non-recombinant. Here you've got a recombinant with the uppercase A and the lowercase b. Here you've got another recombinant with the reverse arrangement, a lowercase a and an uppercase b, and here you've got a non-recombinant shown here. Okay. So essentially, again, going back to the red and blue, at the molecular level, and you've seen diagrams very similar to this already. So you've got a Holiday junction formed here. As you remember, those Holiday junctions are mobile, they can move, they can create hybrid DNA, but here, essentially what this slide is meant to represent is homologous recombination can occur anywhere. It's random, okay? So you can get different combinations of genes, but there will be hybrid regions created. You can see a little bit of hybrid region there. So crossing over, as I keep on saying, is just molecular homologous recombination, okay? So in yeast, and again, you've seen very similar diagrams to this for double-strand break repair. The difference being is that in meiosis, the double-strand breaks are introduced deliberately into the DNA, otherwise the recombination can't take place. So in yeast, the enzyme that's responsible for introducing that double-strand break is called SPO11. That introduces the double-strand break. Then you've got a double-strand break, and similarly, as I showed you for mammalian cells, those ends are because it's a eukaryote. Those ends are processed to create single-stranded DNA, and we know that RAD51 binds the single-stranded DNA and initiates homologous recombination. In yeast, it's this complex, this MRX complex, which just stands for MRE11 RAD50, and instead of the protein in yeast is called XRS2. In mammalian cells is called MBS1. So that's the only difference. It's just a difference in the name. These proteins are homologous to the proteins in mammalian cells. You get creation of single-stranded DNA. That allows RAD51 to bind. But in meiosis, there's also another protein called DMC in yeast called DMC1, which is very similar to RAD51, that will and has a similar function to RAD51, binds single-stranded DNA, initiates the strand invasion, formation of the D loops, exactly as I described for DNA repair process. You get branch migration and creation of these hybrid regions of DNA. So you've got red and blue opposite each other. And depending on how the Holiday junctions, these two Holiday junctions are resolved, you either get a non-crossover. So here you've got red at one end and red at the other end. So there's no, aside from this hybrid region, there's genes that are actually involved, are located at this position. There's no effect on the chromosome because the genes will be arranged, because you've got red here and blue here and blue here. However, there's a crossover in this position, so this won't be, you won't be able to visualize, this doesn't result in the reshuffling of the genes, but 50% of the time it results in a crossover. So you've got red here and blue here, and you've got a crossover in this case, and that's how you create the new combination of genes. Okay, so this just shows this in a little bit more detail. You've got the replicated homologs here. You've got introduction of the double-strand break by SPO11, processing of that double-strand break by MRX to create this single-stranded DNA. I've already told you that bit at the bottom there. And then you've got binding of RAD51 and DMC1 onto that single-stranded DNA, and you get invasion of the duplex strand, and that results in a recombination. And in yeast, DMC1 is a RAD51-like protein, but it only functions in meiosis. So DMC1 doesn't function in repair processes mediated by homologous recombination. It only acts in meiosis. Okay, and just to re-emphasize that, so you've got, this just shows where you do get the case where you get actually crossing over taking place. So you've got the sister chromatids here, you've got blue DNA, and then you've got red DNA here. So you've now created new combinations of genes from the alleles here and the alleles here, and then you've got the non-recombinant. So this can create new combinations of genes, and it says it. there's no detectable change in the genetic makeup of the chromosomes. The chromosomes under the microscope look exactly the same. Okay. However, this crossing over during meiosis can result in a process called gene conversion. If you're doing the genetics practical module, you'll be looking at gene conversion after Easter in an organism called Soderia, but I'm going to give a bit of a background between that. So I'm going to switch to the other presentation now, if you want to, those of you looking at this on your laptop. And the reason for this is just easier to show it in a different orientation. Okay? So to explain this process of gene conversion, very conveniently, nature has given this organism Soderia, and the reason that we use this is this organism actually has an extra stage in meiosis compared to other eukaryotes, where there's an additional mitosis after meiosis has taken place. So I'll try and explain that to you. So it's just a fungi. So this just represents different mating types rather than paternal, maternal. So you've got an alpha and an A mating type, and then that will initiate the process. So when these mate, can't think of a better word than that, when they're located together, that initiates the process of meiosis. So here you're just going through the process. So the nucleus from one mating type and the nucleus from the another mating type will fuse. So these are the gametes. That will create and initiate the process of meiosis. So you go through meiosis 1, meiosis 2. That results in this typical generation of 4 gametes produced. But the difference in this organism is that once they've gone through meiosis, they go through this extra mitosis. Okay, so instead of getting 4 gametes, you get 8 gametes. Very conveniently, those gametes are arranged in these so-called asci, and the products of this meiosis and that additional mitosis are arranged in a linear fashion. Okay, now these ascospores, these individual ascospores, are usually black in colour. So this just shows you the fruit embodies these perithecium. So you can see the perithecium here. You can break these open, and this is what they look like. That's not the greatest of diagrams, particularly in this light, but you can see the linear arrangement in 8s that are present. Now, if in the wild-type organism these ascospores are black, but you can get mutant varieties which produce yellow or colourless ascospores, and you can see here, you can see some yellow ascospores here as opposed to the black ones here. Okay, so essentially showing you this diagram here. So this is the normal product of meiosis, and you get arrangement of 4 gametes. Now remember that in Soderia they go through an extra mitosis at the end of this, so they actually produce 8. So what I want to go through is a scenario where homologous recombination takes place during meiosis in this organism when you've mated a strain that's got the wild type ascospore colour black with a strain that's got the mutant version of the gene and produces yellow ascospores. Okay, so yellow and black. These just meant to represent the chromosome on which that gene is located. So you've got the wild type designated by a plus. So this is the wild type gene located at this position on the chromosome, and then you've got a mutant allele here designated by M, which results in yellow ascospores. I've coloured these yellow and black. Obviously the chromosomes aren't yellow and black, but they're meant to represent. It just makes the diagram easy to use. So here are the haploid parents. They go through the process of meiosis. So the DNA is replicated. You get this 4-strand stage, and you get the tetrad produced. So you've got the arrangement here. Remember, this organism has an extra mitosis, so these effectively double up then. And this is the arrangement you get when you mate one of these mutants with a wild type, the ascus produced will actually have 4 yellow ascospores and 4 black ascospores. Okay, that's the situation if no homologous recombination takes place. Okay, homologous recombination, if you remember, can shuffle these things and cause crossing over. So this is where the scenario, and I say very nicely, the products of that meiosis plus the actual mitosis, you get this nice linear arrangement. Okay, so those are the non-recombinants. Now I'm going to go through a scenario where you get homologous recombination taking place or crossing over taking place between these chromosomes. That's a rubbish slide, especially in this slide, but that's meant to show 4 black and 4 yellow ascospores. Okay, but here you can see there's some other arrangements. You can't see it. You can see arrangements that don't conform to that 4 yellow and 4 black. If you can't see it, trust me, it's there. Okay, so you can get non-recombinants, 4 yellow, 4 black, and you can get the recombinants, and these are all possible arrangements you can get as a result of homologous recombination or crossing over taking place. So you've got 2 black, 4 yellow, 2 black. You've got the reverse of that, and then you can get these arrangements where you've got 2 yellow, 2 black, 2 yellow, 2 black, or the reverse of that. And actually under the microscope you can't distinguish these because you can't tell which end is which. So these look the same under the microscope. 2 black, 2 yellow, 2 black, 2 yellow, exactly the same. Okay, so I'll show you how these can be generated in a moment. But you also get, so these are all considered to be normal arrangements. These are normal, so no recombination. Recombination should be taking place in meiosis. So these are just recombinants. They normally take place. Okay, so you get generation of these. However, when you look under the microscope, you see some ascospores, and they maybe, I don't know, 5% of the time, or possibly even less. You get these arrangements which are regarded as aberrant or abnormal. Okay, now these are a result of a phenomenon called gene conversion, which is what I want to try and explain to you. So you might get changes in the ratio. So here you've got 4 black, 6 black and 2 yellow, and here you've got 2 black and 6 yellow. And I've just represented these in a linear fashion by putting 6 pluses and 2 M's. Okay, just to simplify how we show these arrangements. You can get other arrangements. You can get other changes in the ratio. You can get 5:3 ratio. You can get a 7:1 ratio, and you can get these the other way around as well. Here you've got 4 black ascospores and 4 yellow ascospores, but the arrangement is aberrant. It's abnormal. They're not in pairs. So you've got 2 black, and then you've got a black and a yellow. You've got 2 yellow, and then a black and a yellow. Okay. So if you look at the normal ones, the ascospores are in pairs. They're always 2 black and 2 yellow together. So this is an aberrant arrangement. So again here you've got a pair here which is black and yellow, so that's aberrant. There's a pair here which is black and yellow, but the ratio is off as well. Okay, so how are these actually generated? So if we go back to where there's no recombination, you can see how the 4 black and 4 yellow are generated. So what I want you to visualize or try to visualize is where we're talking about these homologous chromosomes, is each of these chromatids is double-stranded DNA. Okay, so I've now tried to represent these. So this is meant to represent one strand of that double strand, and this is meant to represent the second strand. Okay, so this is double-stranded DNA because that's what a chromatid is. And again, double-stranded DNA here, double-stranded DNA here, double-stranded DNA here. So these are the individual strands of DNA. Okay. Okay, and when these segregate, because you've got that extra mitosis in this organism, effectively each single strand is going to give rise to an ascospore because it goes through that additional replication, that additional mitosis. Okay, so effectively, if you think about the tetrad at this position, this single strand will give rise to a black ascospore. This single strand will give rise to black ascospore. This single strand will give rise to this yellow ascospore because you've got that additional mitosis. You've got that doubling up of from a tetrad to an 8 arrangement. Okay, so now I want to visualize homologous recombination taking place, and I've just numbered these chromatids 1, 2, and 3. So I want to visualize what happens when you get crossing over at this position. So this is the location of the gene here. You get crossing over taking place, which is just a holiday junction, and you get crossing over. So what happens is you've got that yellow DNA here going through the crossover and resulting in black. So when this holiday junction is resolved, you've got recombination taking place at the chromosome level, and you can see that that's rearranged the arrangement of the genes in these homologous chromosomes. So you've got black, yellow, black, yellow. Remember, each of those strands will give rise to one ascospore. So you've now got an arrangement where you've got 2 black, 2 yellow, 2 black, and 2 yellow. And you can see how that arises. So this is a normal arrangement generated through chiasma formation or homologous recombination. Okay, so this is just to remind you what's happening at the molecular level. So these are effectively the holiday junctions or the chiasma. Now, what I want to point out is because the holiday junctions are mobile and move along, you get creation of this hybrid DNA. Okay. So in our previous diagram, and remember that when you've got the homologous recombination taking place, you get one strand from one duplex, hydrogen bonding with a complementary strand from the other duplex, and creating this hybrid DNA. Okay, so that's important. Okay, so what happens if that hybrid region just happens to be generated where our gene is for ascospore color? Okay, what happens at that level? So I've gone red and blue now instead of black and yellow. So let's imagine a situation where you get crossing over, but that hybrid region is created at the locus for that ascospore color. Okay, I'll just show these at that level. So what you will get is, if this occurs if this hybrid region is generated at the position of the gene, you will get one strand of wild-type DNA and a strand of mutant DNA. Okay? So now there will be differences in the sequence of the wild-type gene to the mutant gene. Okay? Let's assume that mutant has got a base pair substitution, and that's why you don't get the yellow, you don't get the black pigmentation produced, you only get yellow produced. Okay? So you've now got this hybrid region here where you've got a wild type and a mutant strand of DNA. That will result in mismatches. So if we go back to this sequence here, so imagine this is the wild type DNA feeding in, and this is the mutant DNA feeding in, and you've got that base pair substitution. That will create, at that position, a mismatch when those strands are zipped back up again. Okay? So I want to imagine that and now going to the strand level. So let's so there's a triplet code, 3 T's and 3 A's, and here in the mutant you've got this base substitution where you've got a TA to a CG base substitution, and this means that the protein produced from the gene is no longer black and results in yellow ascospores. Okay, so if we get this crossing over taking place and creation of the hybrid region here, effectively what you've got, and I'm not showing because obviously this will be 3 T's and 3 A's here, but in those hybrid regions here, you've now got a mismatch. You've got a T opposite a G here, so that's a mismatch, and you've got a C opposite here, that's a mismatch. Those won't hydrogen bond, okay? T shouldn't be with G and C shouldn't be with A. Now, as far as the cell is concerned, there shouldn't be mismatches, so that will cause a distortion in the DNA helix. And the repair mechanisms of the cell will attempt to repair that mismatch. Okay, I talked about mismatch repair in E. coli. What is happening is if you've got the creation of these mismatches, and you've got now so you've got this mismatch base pair, which the repair enzymes of in this case Soderia will recognize and will attempt to repair them. Okay. So there's three possible situations for each of those mismatches. I'll show the mismatches here. The mismatch is resolved by a mismatch repair process, and that repair can be in either direction. You can either go back and to a TA base pair, or you can go back to a CG base pair. The reason for that is the mismatch repair process can't distinguish whether between mutant and wild type DNA. All it sees is a mismatch. It doesn't. The repair enzymes don't know there should be a TA there to give the wild type, or if it's a CG. So it's a 50-50 chance. Okay. So in 50% of the time when repair occurs, you get creation of the wild type allele, and 50% of the time you get creation of the mutant allele. Okay. Or if there's not an opportunity to repair that mismatch before DNA replication occurs, before you go into the mitosis, extra mitosis, no repair occurs before DNA replication. So what's the result of that? So these are the three scenarios you've got here. Repair back to the wild type allele, where you've got recreation of that TA base pair. DNA replication occurs. Now this will then result in black ascospores, and this will also result in black ascospores. Okay. The other scenario is that TG mismatch is repaired to CG, which is the mutant version of the gene, and when DNA replication takes place, you get creation of the mutant allele, and these will give rise to yellow ascospores. Okay. If there's no repair takes place prior to DNA replication, you get creation of one wild type allele and one mutant allele. Okay. So So let's think of one of those scenarios here where we've got the mismatches here. At the DNA level, this is what they look like. So let's imagine a situation where both mismatches are repaired randomly back to the wild type allele. So both of these mismatches, this mismatch here and this mismatch here, both go back to that TA base pair. So this is what the chromosomes will look like then. You've obviously got the two wild types which weren't involved in the crossing over, but here you've got recreation of the wild type allele, recreation of the wild type allele. So when these things go through that extra mitosis, you've got wild type allele here and wild type allele here. So that will generate an ascospore that has 6 wild type ascospores and 2 mutant ascospores, so that gives you the 6 black and the 6 yellow. Okay. Let's imagine a different scenario where we assume that both of the mismatches aren't repaired prior to DNA replication. Okay. So they stay exactly the same. So when this thing segregates out, that's so you've still got T here, G here. So when these segregate out, that's going to give you 3 red or wild type. 1, 2, 3. Then a mutant. Then another mutant. Then a wild type. And then two mutants. So here you've actually got that 4-to-4 ratio. You've got that 4-to-4 ratio, but it's an aberrant 4-to-4 ratio. And you can immediately tell that because you've got 2 mutants here, but then you've got a pair where you've got a mutant and a wild type opposite each other. Okay, so I'm just showing you 2 possible examples of what can occur. What I want to say to you is that all those aberrant ascospore arrangements can be explained by heteroduplex formation and the creation of mismatches. All these different ratios, all the aberrant 4x4s can all be arranged. Now the ratio and the exact arrangement of those ascospores will depend on the chromatids involved. I've just shown you a couple of examples that happen to include chromatids 2 and 3. You can get recombination occurring between chromatids 1 and 4, or 4 and 2, or 1 and 3. Okay, so that will impact on the ratio. It'll also depend on whether mismatch repair occurs. I showed you a scenario where there was no mismatch repair, and also the direction of the mismatch can occur. And also, you can get crossing over between all of the chromatids. You can get crossing over between, say, 1 and 3 and 2 and 4. So you've got mismatches created in all 4 of those chromatids. And in fact, the only way you can explain these 7-to-1 ratios is if crossing over has occurred at exactly the same position, but in both chromatids. Okay. So that's hopefully explained that. If you're doing the practical module, you'll actually be handling the Sodaria and you'll be scoring those arrangements, and you'll see that in a lot more detail. So we're going back now to this slide presentation. Almost finished. So hopefully, let's say very nicely, this organism allows us to actually visualize gene conversion under the microscope. But obviously, this process occurs in meiosis with any organism in which meiosis takes place. So in our meiosis, gene conversion will be taking place as well. Now, more rarely, you can get crossing over during mitosis. Okay. Now, this occurs much less frequently, hundreds of fold times less than in meiosis, but it does take place. And these phenomena, when you get crossing over during mitosis, and emphasize that, results in a phenomenon called sister chromatid exchange. Now, I briefly mentioned sister chromatid exchange when I was talking about homologous recombination repair. Okay. So sister chromatid exchange, you can visualize that by using different labeling. If there was no crossing over at all, and here's a chromosome where there's not much crossing over, you would get these would be completely red on one side and completely yellow on the other side. This happens to be a cell line that shows multiple sister chromatid exchange because it lacks a particular repair enzyme. But this is crossing over seen during mitosis. And when you see crossing over in mitosis, it represents, or it's a product of, homologous recombination repair taking place in that cell. Okay. So I've just said that. So crossing over in mitosis represents homologous recombination repair of DNA damage. That DNA damage may be spontaneous or it could be induced. If we take cells and treat them with the DNA damaging agents, we see that rates of sister chromatid exchange actually increase. Okay, so if we go back to this, remember I said about having a single strand break here. You've got this one-ended double strand break, and that can result in this process of sister chromatid exchange. Also, homologous recombination repair in mammalian cells can also result in gene conversion taking place. Okay, so this gene conversion phenomena can take place in somatic cells undergoing mitosis. Okay, why is that important? And why is sister chromatid exchange important? Again, you've got this. Again, gene conversion can occur here because you've got creation of these hybrid regions of DNA. These can all result in the process of gene conversion. And why? There should be an extra. I thought there was an extra slide there. But the reason that this gene conversion process is important is it can result in loss of heterozygosity. Now, remember when I talked about cancer genes, such as retinoblastoma and others, you get this loss of heterozygosity. Okay. Loss of heterozygosity can result from this process of gene conversion. Okay, so if you've got a cell that's got, say, mutant retinoblastoma, and you've got a wild type allele, if that cell happens to undergo homologous recombination at the and includes the retinoblastoma allele, and you get creation of these mismatches, they can be resolved, and that can result in loss of heterozygosity. So this is one mechanism where loss of heterozygosity can arise. And it's one of the reasons in retinoblastoma, if you've already got a mutant copy, then this process can result in the process of loss of heterozygosity. Okay, I have actually finished, I've caught up. That's my last lecture on my material, but you will see me again for the continuous assessment, the essay writing, and also the feedback session, where I'll feedback not only on the continuous assessment, but also on the essay, okay? So have a lovely Easter, and do lots of revision.